All right, this is Richard Golson. Welcome back to Lab 2, Build Your VPC and Launch a Web Server. We're going to be wrapping up this recording with Task 4, Launch a Web Server Instance. In this task, we launch that Amazon EC2 instance into a new VPC, where we can see the VPC where we'll be launching it into. And we're going to configure the instance to act as a web server. And you'll see that we're going to be launching it into Lab Subnet Public 2 right over here. We're going to use that security group we used earlier. And when we're interacting with it through our web browser, our traffic will flow through the internet gateway and directly to our web server and does not need to use NAT gateway. If we were to launch the server into a private subnet, then we would not be able to access it directly because the NAT gateway would block incoming requests that didn't originate from the web server. So we have to launch this in the public subnet. We didn't really need the NAT gateway. This was more to give us experience with this, because we'll see later on that we'll frequently be launching resources in the private subnet, in which case we'll need NAT gateways. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. If you take a look over here, we can see that I'm already into the EC2 dashboard. And what I want to do is go ahead and click on either instances here, which show me my running instances, or instances here. I'll go ahead and click on this node here. And so we can see that we currently have a single instance that was launched by the lab itself. It's a Bastion host. And we'll learn later on how Bastion hosts are used. In our case, we can safely ignore it. And what we'll do is go ahead and hit the Launch Instance button. So let's briefly review what this looks like. So first of all, notice that on the side, we get a summary. So as we make changes through this page here, we'll see some updates here in terms of the details of our configuration of our EC2 instance. Eventually, what we'll see is we'll be able to hit the launch instance. Right now, if I click launch instance, it would be able to do so, but certain things would be left out. So what I want to do is make sure I configure it appropriately. So what I'm going to do here is take a look. And so the first thing I'm going to do is give it a name. This creates, again, a name tag. So we can see that we'll be providing the name tag. And we're going to add more tags if we need to, like project tags and department tags and cost center tags and those kind of things. So let me go ahead and copy that in and paste it in. I like to copy and paste specifically with the labs, because the labs, when they grade or when you're in production, accuracy counts. And if you name something incorrectly, it can create issues elsewhere when something that you're trying to accomplish is based upon the name, and the name that where you're getting your information from might not be in the EC2 console. Looking at the resource, you might actually have a log or some kind of document or a schematic map. So it's important that we're accurate. Case sensitivity. Many of the resources are going to be case sensitive. The lab grading script typically is case sensitive. So if I use upper instead of lowercase, etc., or in this case, if I were to put lowercase and not upper, it might not see the resource because it's looking for it by name. Same thing with spacing, etc. Okay, now what I want to do here is choose an AMI to create this. And we have these what are called quick start AMIs. There's many different types of AMIs. We're going to be using an AMI that's based on Amazon Linux. And you can see here's the specific one. It's a free tier eligible. When it's free tier, in your first year of your account, you get 750 hours if you're creating one of the appropriate size. So this will let me know when things are free tier eligible or not. We can see it here. So we're going to leave this alone. We're not making any changes here. Scrolling down, we'll need to choose an instance type. And you'll note that it's indicating that we should be using a T2.micro, and that is what is already selected as default because that one's free tier eligible. Notice that we'll get 1 virtual CPU and 1 GB of memory. And then here's the pricing. Since this is Linux based, we're going to be paying a bit over a penny per hour. So it's pretty low priced. Now, For the key pair, this is what allows us to use secure shell. If I needed to log on to that EC2 instance, so I can make modifications within using the operating system on that EC2 instance, the Linux operating system using a bash shell, I'm going to need to use secure shell, which means I need a key pair. So for this, you'll note that they've already provided a key pair for us. So we can just select it. It's called vote key. That is the name of the key pair. And because it's already created, I'll be able to download the other half of the pair a bit later. I can also download it at deployment. I'm not actually going to be using it in this lab, so you could actually ignore it if you don't want. Best practices, don't incorporate it if you don't need it. But if you think you're going to need it, you should install one because you can't install it after the fact. It's the only way you could log or sign on to the operating system on that EC2 instance is if it has an embedded key. All right, so we have that. And then what we're going to do is go to the network settings, and you'll notice that it wants to use this VPC. And this is VPCs 07, et cetera, CCA6. And if I go and take a look over here, that is not the VPC I need. I need one that ends in F623. So what I'll need to do is change my network settings by hitting edit. So what it's trying to use is the default VPC. Every account comes with a single default VPC in each region. But because I created one, I need to change this to the one I want, which is lab VPC, F623. And I can see the IP address range changes as well. So now I have the appropriate IP address. And then the subnet, if you'll take a look here, I want to make sure I'm using lab subnet public 2. And it looks like I have it. Do not assume that it assigns the correct one. It is not using any metrics to assign this to a subnet. This is just the first one that popped up out of the list. Notice that's the first one that's displayed. It could just as easily have given us a different subnet, one that was not appropriate. So pay attention to the subnet. Make sure you check that it has the correct name. And then what we want to do here for the auto-assigned public IP, we need to provide an IPv4 address, a public IPv4 address. The private IPv4 addresses that it will assign are not routable. So even though it'll have a private address that can move within the network, in order for it to interact or for resources outside web browsers to interact with my web server needs that public IP address. Only the public IP addresses will be routed through the internet gateway. Otherwise, the internet gateway will not transfer that traffic. So we need to have one assigned to the EC2 instance. And so I need to make sure I enable the auto assignment there. Now, for the security group, it will create one at the time of launch if that's what I want. But we created one earlier, if you recall. We created one and assigned it to the VPC network or to the lab VPC network. And we created a rule on that would allow HTTP traffic, incoming HTTP traffic from all IP addresses. So I'll select this, change my security group. Right now it's looking them up, trying to find it. There's the web security group. If I click on that, and then because it doesn't show me the open ports on there, what it's going to allow, I could click on the compare security group rules. And it says, okay, this is what you're getting here. This is what it's allowing. So I'll go ahead and select that security group. Now I know I have the right one. All right. Now we'll skip the advanced network configuration. And what we're going to do is we're going to come down here and take a look and see that storage has already been configured with an 8 GB GP3 root volume. It's not encrypted. Now, the size of the volume is typically the root volume is typically set based upon the AMI. So you get the appropriately sized storage, but it might not be appropriate for storing additional data beyond what is in your AMI. So it does give you extra space. It's larger than what the AMI needs, because when you launch your EC2 instance, we'll learn later on that it actually is taking the contents of the AMI and copying them into the storage volume. So we could increase the size of this. We can even add additional storage, and we can change the root volume type. We'll learn more about those things later. We're going to leave them at that. But what we do want to do is come down here, and we need to use the user data to have the EC2 instance read and run the commands in this script. This script is what will install the Apache web server in PHP. It will download the lab files from an S3 bucket. It will unzip those files to an HTML www folder. That is the folder or directory that the web server running on this EC2 instance would expect to find the files at. And then it turns on the HTTP service, it starts it, and it also ensures that if I restart the web server, it will restart the HTTP service. It doesn't just leave it turned off. So I need to add those advanced details. So what I'll do here is expand this button or this piece here. I can ignore these. There'll be times at which you'll need to use those, but we can ignore all that right now. You'll learn more about some of these settings in the next lab. Now I'm coming down to the user data. We could submit a file. We could submit this as a file, but what we're going to do is just copy and then paste this in. Don't worry about the additional blank lines. You can just leave that alone. Just make sure that you didn't leave off any character. So it should begin with this hash bang, and it should end with the word start. And as long as you have that, means you didn't cut any of that off. But it's worth taking a quick review to make sure it's all in there. This is going to run with root user permissions on the guest operating system of the EC2 instance. It gets run automatically when the instance launches for the first time. That this script, again, installs the web server, it installs a database, and it installs PHP libraries, and it downloads and installs the PHP web application on the web server. So we've completed all that. Reviewing this quickly over on this side, we can see nothing really changed. It's creating one instance. It's using that Amazon Linux 2023 AMI. T2 Micro is using the web server, the web security group. So we can see the change there. This didn't change. And some of the other details, you won't see them here. At this point, what I'm going to do is hit launch instance, and then we'll see a progress occur here. So successfully initiated launch of my instance. What I want to do is click the View All Instances button here. And I don't see the instance. So if you recall, using the refresh tells the console to make a request back to the, in this case, EC2 service to, and it's requesting a list of all the EC2 instances for this region, for this account. And so now I can select that, and I can watch and see that it's now in the running state, but it hasn't finished the status checks. And if I come over here and take a look here, status and alarms, you can see that these two status checks have now passed. If I refresh this, and it now says it's initializing. And once I see that we have that both of these have passed, then I should be able to view the application running on my EC2 instance. Until then, the EC2 instance currently is configuring all of those services and pulling down the packages and deploying the packages to the appropriate folder. So I have to wait for that to occur. In the meantime, if I click over here, I can see the details, including the public IP. I'm going to go ahead and select this and show you what happens if I select this too soon. I think it probably is too soon. Notice it copied the address. Now, if I come over here and paste it in and say go, it actually is done. Okay, that's good news. So that was pretty quick. It deployed pretty fast. And if I go over here and do a refresh, yeah, it doesn't look like it's generating the correct information, oddly enough. But it is ready, or we wouldn't see this. So it's been deployed. We're good to go. A couple things to note. I use the IP address. Remember, it has a public IPv4 DNS, so I'll click on this to highlight that, and then, or to copy it, and then I'll paste it in. Note it's going to be HTTP. Remember what we did with the security group. We take a look at the security group that we used. It's only allowing traffic HTTP traffic. So we can only use HTTP. Please be mindful that if you click on the open address button, it'll attempt to use HTTPS and it will fail because that is going to get blocked. We're not allowing HTTPS traffic to pass. Therefore, it will get blocked and you'll see this. When you look at this connection, you'll see it's insecure. Connection is not secure. And you can see that it does not supply any kind of ownership information because it's not using HTTPS TLS. Okay. And you see that's still trying to connect. So again, be mindful not to use the open address because by default, it's going to use HTTPS. Copy the address here or copy the address here. Please note that if I try to use the private IP address, again, it won't find the EC2 instance. In this case, it's a networking error. It's not a security group error. This is a non-routable address, so therefore it will not find my EC2 instance. All right, that's essentially it for the lab. Don't forget to submit your work. We'll take a look at that in the next step and just see what it looks like. See you then.